The CEO lost it when he saw his son picking up crumbs to eat, and it was all his new wife's fault. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you are watching from. Let's get started. Robert Mitchell always believed that security meant financial stability. As CEO of one of America's leading technology companies, living in a luxurious penthouse in Beacon Hill, Boston, he spent more time in business meetings than at home. He commanded teams, closed multi-million-dollar contracts, and accumulated industry awards, while his home seemed, at least in appearance, to be running smoothly. Married for 3 years to Jessica Parker, sister of his late wife Emily, Robert believed he had made the best choice by keeping Nathan, his 7-year-old son, close to the only maternal reference left. Jessica always showed composure, a striking social presence, a smile trained for charitable events in Boston's high society. She was seen as an example of a dedicated stepmother and supportive wife. What Robert didn't know was that behind the sophistication and good manners, there was a carefully orchestrated structure of control, isolation, and psychological abuse. That night, after another exhausting day at the office, Robert arrived home late, as usual. The penthouse was silent, but something caught his attention, a slight metallic noise coming from the service area. Curious, he followed the sound. As he approached, he froze before a scene that made no sense. Nathan, the son he always treated as a priority, was crouched down in dirty pajamas, rummaging through garbage bags with his small hands, looking for food scraps. When surprised, the boy instinctively hid a piece of stale bread, as if it were a forbidden treasure. That image froze Robert. The contrast between the opulence of the apartment and the silent desperation of his son exposed a crack in the reality he believed solid. It was impossible to accept that this was an isolated case. Something very wrong was happening right under his roof. That same night, with his son fed and sleeping beside him, Robert sat in his office and began to reflect on the signs he had never seen. The absence of colorful drawings on the walls, Nathan's silence at home, clothes that seemed too loose for his thin body, and the recent dismissal of the trusted housekeeper without clear explanations. Determined, he began to investigate. He checked the statements of the account created exclusively for Nathan's expenses and discovered that the card had not been used for months. He went through folders and found a spreadsheet of Jessica's personal expenses, full of luxury purchases, aesthetic treatments, and fine dining, all incompatible with what she claimed to spend on maintaining the house. Something deeper was hidden, and Robert needed to see with his own eyes. The next day, pretending to maintain his routine, he discreetly installed a backup of the penthouse's security camera system. The recordings from previous days revealed more than he was prepared to see. Nathan was constantly ignored, prevented from accessing the kitchen, and kept away from common spaces. In some scenes, he tried to reach for water and was stopped by Jessica, who coldly sent him back to his room. There were also images of Jessica smiling warmly at the boy just moments before Robert's arrival, as if staging an ideal domestic life. This wasn't just neglect, it was a meticulous performance. Worse still, Nathan not only accepted the silence, but practiced it with a kind of resignation that can only be learned through constant fear. Robert spent the following days observing and documenting everything. He tried to approach Nathan lightly, asking subtle questions, encouraging him to open up. Gradually, the boy revealed disturbing habits. He hid food for when he was punished, wrote letters to his deceased mother, and lived in fear of being sent away if he said anything about Jessica. He told how he had been locked in his room, hungry for an entire day, and that he frequently heard that he was a burden and that he ruined everything Jessica had achieved. With a heavy heart, Robert sought support. Through a trusted friend, he got the contact of Dr. Sarah Thompson, a social worker specializing in high-income families. Sarah, experienced and sensitive, quickly recognized the classic signs of emotional abuse and neglect. She advised Robert to continue documenting everything carefully and scheduled an informal visit to the residence. During the interview with Jessica, the stepmother maintained her pose as an elegant woman, serving coffee and displaying toys purposefully scattered around the living room. But Sarah was not fooled by performances. Her eyes were trained to notice details that revealed the truth in the silences, hesitations, automatic gestures. Nathan, quiet and alert, avoided looking at Jessica. When he managed to be alone with Sarah, he revealed that he wrote letters to his mother and that he often ate in secret when his father wasn't around. This information, combined with the recordings and financial records, already formed a solid basis for legal action. Robert then sought out Rachel Bennett, a family law attorney. Upon presenting the evidence, Rachel was direct. Jessica was not only psychologically abusing Nathan, but trying to isolate father and son to maintain control of the environment. She suggested a careful legal strategy, warning that Jessica might counterattack. And she did. A few days later, Robert received an official notification. Jessica had filed a complaint against him, alleging paranoid behavior, emotional outbursts, and paternal neglect. The complaint included forged documents, screenshots of searches made by Robert, and questionable testimonies about his supposed instability. It was the move of someone who knew they were losing control. Robert's response came with force. With support from Sarah and Rachel, he summoned Mrs. Wilson, the former housekeeper fired by Jessica. In a discreet meeting, Mrs. Wilson presented photos of Nathan sick, locked up, and told how she had secretly cared for him during a fever crisis, since Jessica had refused to offer even medicine. The images showed the pale boy, cold sweating, curled up under a thin blanket. This, combined with the social worker's report and the psychological assessment from Dr. Megan Brooks, which indicated clear signs of trauma and emotional deprivation, formed an irrefutable dossier. Nathan exhibited behaviors typical of children living in a constant state of alert, distrustful, silent, afraid of being punished for any spontaneous expression. Jessica, realizing her narrative was beginning to crumble, started acting even more erratically. She tried to bribe Nathan's former teacher to state that the boy suffered from his father's behavior. When that failed, she resorted to emotional blackmail. On one of the days preceding the judicial hearing, she approached Robert in the building corridors, offering to give up everything in exchange for silence and discretion. But Robert had already crossed the point of no return. There was no more room for agreements, not after everything he had discovered. The case went to family court, where the judge, based on evidence, documents, testimonies, and reports, began to understand the pattern of manipulation and abuse that unfolded behind the facade of a successful family. Nathan was heard in a special room, monitored by professionals. His accounts, though childlike, had a consistency that was difficult to refute. When the former housekeeper testified, bringing the photos and reports, the process took a definitive turn. Meanwhile, Robert and Nathan were reconnecting. The house, once marked by silence and tension, began to give way to small everyday joys. Robert prepared breakfast, sat down to watch his son's favorite cartoons, and reread with him old letters from his mother, Emily, kept in the back of the closet. Gradually, Nathan stopped fearing his father's arrival at night. He began to smile more frequently. He went back to drawing. He went back to being a child. But the true impact of the transformation was yet to come. Robert had always built his life around work, convinced that what mattered most was providing financially. His own childhood had been marked by scarcity, growing up in a small apartment in South Boston where his mother worked double shifts to keep the lights on. He'd promised himself his own family would never know that kind of struggle, yet here he was, watching his son's tentative smile over breakfast, realizing how blind he'd been to the wealth that truly mattered. "Dad?" Nathan's voice broke through his thoughts. "Can we go to the park today?" Such a simple request, yet Robert realized it was something they'd never done together. Jessica had always managed Nathan's schedule, insisting the boy needed structure while Robert worked. Another control mechanism he'd failed to recognize. "Absolutely," Robert replied, feeling a strange mixture of joy and grief at how Nathan's eyes widened in surprise. "In fact, why don't we make it a whole day? The public garden, lunch at that place with the giant hamburgers, maybe even the aquarium." Nathan hesitated, glancing toward the hallway as if Jessica might appear to revoke this unexpected freedom. "But don't you have work?" Robert set down his coffee mug. "Nothing more important than this," he said firmly. That day became the first of many. Robert arranged for temporary leave from his company. Something unthinkable just weeks earlier. His team was shocked. Robert Mitchell had never taken more than a weekend off in 5 years, but he delegated with a new clarity of purpose. The company would survive without him for a while. His son might not. Boston in spring offered endless possibilities. They explored the Freedom Trail. Nathan full of questions about history that revealed a curious mind starved for engagement. They threw baseballs in the common. Robert discovering his son had quite an arm. They rode the swan boats and visited museums, Nathan gradually becoming more animated, more childlike with each passing day. During one of these outings, sitting on a bench with ice cream cones, Nathan asked the question Robert had been dreading. "Is Jessica coming back?" Robert chose his words carefully. "No, buddy, she's not." Nathan nodded, looking down at his melting ice cream. "She told me Mum would be disappointed in me." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. "Nathan, look at me," he said gently. "Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. The last thing she said to me was how perfect you were, how proud she was to be your mum." It wasn't an exaggeration. Emily's final conscious moments in the hospital had been filled with concern not for herself, but for the son she was leaving behind. "I don't remember her very well anymore," Nathan admitted, his voice small. "I'll tell you everything that Robert promised. Every day, I'll tell you a new story about her." That night, he began with how he and Emily had met, as college students caught in a sudden downpour without umbrellas, taking shelter in the same coffee shop doorway. Nathan had listened, rapt, asking questions about what she was like, what made her laugh, whether she liked dinosaurs too. As days turned into weeks, Robert noticed the changes in Nathan, physical ones, as proper nutrition returned color to his cheeks and filled out the hollows beneath his eyes. But more importantly, emotional ones. The boy who had fearfully hidden bread was now comfortable asking for snacks. The child who had flinched at sudden movements now accepted hugs freely. He sang in the shower and left toys scattered across the living room floor without frantically cleaning up at the sound of the front door. Robert found himself changing too. His phone stayed in his pocket during their outings. Email notifications went unchecked for hours. The world that had once seemed to revolve around quarterly reports and investor meetings now centered on spelling tests and bedtime stories. Dr. Thompson continued regular sessions with both of them. "He's making remarkable progress," she told Robert during one of their check-ins. "Children are incredibly resilient when given the right environment." "And the court case?" Robert asked. Sarah's expression grew serious. "Jessica's legal team is aggressive. They're painting you as an absent father who suddenly developed convenient concern. They're questioning why you never noticed the situation before." It was the question that haunted Robert most. How hadn't he seen? The answer was painful in its simplicity. He hadn't been looking. He'd outsourced his most important job to a woman who had seen his son not as a child to nurture, but as an obstacle to overcome. "We have the evidence," Sarah reminded him gently, "and more importantly, we have Nathan's testimony." The thought of his son having to speak about his experiences in court filled Robert with dread. "Isn't there any way to spare him that?" "The judge has agreed to a private interview in chambers, with only the court-appointed guardian present. Nathan's strong enough for this, Robert. Children often surprise us with their courage." The day before Nathan's interview, Robert took him for ice cream again, wanting to create a buffer of happiness before the difficult day ahead. They sat by the harbor, watching boats crisscross the water. "Dad, if I tell the judge everything, will Jessica be angry?" Robert's heart constricted. "You just need to tell the truth, buddy. That's all anyone is asking of you." Nathan nodded solemnly, licking his cone. "The truth is, she was nice when you were home, and different when you weren't." The simple articulation of Jessica's manipulation struck Robert anew. His 7-year-old son had seen through her performance while Robert, with all his business acumen and supposed intelligence, had been completely fooled. "I used to pretend Mom could see me," Nathan continued, eyes on the water. "When I was locked in my room, I'd tell her stories so I wouldn't be scared." Robert pulled Nathan close, ice cream forgotten. "She would have been so proud of how brave you've been." That night, as Robert tucked Nathan in, the boy asked for an extra nightlight. "Just for tomorrow," he explained. "So I remember to be brave." Robert sat by his son's bed long after Nathan had fallen asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. The nightlight cast soft shadows across walls that now displayed Nathan's artwork, colorful, sometimes chaotic drawings that expressed a child's view of the world. One in particular caught Robert's eye. 3 stick figures standing together. Me, you, and Mom watching from heaven, Nathan had explained when he'd proudly presented it. The hearing date arrived with a Boston spring shower that drummed against the windows. Robert knelt before Nathan in the courthouse corridor, straightening the boy's tie, a small gesture of normalcy, before Nathan was led away by the court-appointed guardian, a kind-faced woman who specialized in cases involving children. "Remember," Robert said, meeting his son's eyes. "Just tell the truth." Nathan nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I brought this," he said, showing Robert a small stone Emily had once given him, found on a beach trip when Nathan was barely 3. "Mom said it was special." "It is," Robert affirmed, "and so are you." As Nathan disappeared down the hallway with the guardian, Robert felt a presence beside him. Rachel Bennett, his attorney, stood holding a leather portfolio. "They've just arrived," she said quietly, nodding toward the end of the corridor where Jessica was entering with her legal team, 3 suited figures surrounding her like a protective detail. She looked immaculate as always, dressed conservatively in cream and navy, her expression composed. Seeing her now, Robert wondered how he'd ever missed the coldness behind her perfect facade. "Don't engage," Rachel warned, guiding him toward their assigned room. "The judge will see Nathan first, then review the evidence. We're well prepared." The next 4 hours were among the longest of Robert's life. He sat in a conference room with Rachel, reviewing their case while trying not to imagine what Nathan might be saying, whether he was frightened, whether Jessica's legal team was trying to discredit a 7-year-old's testimony. When they were finally called into the judge's chambers, Robert was surprised to find only the judge present, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, gesturing to a chair, "I've spoken with Nathan and reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. I've made my decision, but before I announce it formally, I wanted to speak with you directly." Robert nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. "Your son is an extraordinary child," the judge continued. "Perceptive, thoughtful, and remarkably clear about what he experienced. But what struck me most was something he said when I asked what he wanted to happen now." She paused, studying Robert. He said, "I want my dad to be happy again, too." Robert felt tears threatening. After everything Nathan had endured, his concern was still for others. "The court's decision will grant you full custody. With Ms. Parker permitted no contact until extensive psychological evaluation and therapy are completed. At minimum, the evidence of emotional abuse and neglect is overwhelming." Relief flooded through Robert, but the judge wasn't finished. "Mr. Mitchell, Nathan also told me about your recent changes, the time you've spent together, the leave of absence from work. Children notice these things. They're far more aware than we give them credit for." "I've learned that too late," Robert admitted. "Not too late," the judge corrected him. "Just in time." As they left the courthouse, Robert carrying Nathan on his shoulders, the rain had cleared to reveal a brilliant blue sky. Nathan pointed excitedly at a rainbow arching over Boston Harbor. "Dad, look, Mom's watching us." Robert smiled, blinking back tears. "Yes," he said. "I believe she is. Agora vou criar o segundo capítulo da história." The weeks following the court decision brought a new rhythm to the Mitchell household. Robert's temporary leave from Mitchell Technologies had stretched into a more permanent arrangement. He had reorganized the company leadership, promoting his longtime COO Jennifer Wu to interim CEO, while he took on a consulting role that required less than half his previous hours. The penthouse that had once felt more like a showroom than a home gradually transformed. The sterile white walls that Jessica had insisted upon now displayed Nathan's artwork in mismatched frames. The formal living room that had been off-limits to small hands now contained a sprawling train set that sometimes remained assembled for days. Evidence of life, of childhood, permeated spaces previously reserved for appearances. As summer approached, Robert faced a new challenge. Nathan's school year was ending, and the prestigious summer camps Jessica had always arranged no longer seemed appropriate. When Robert broached the subject over breakfast, Nathan pushed his cereal around his bowl. "Do I have to go to camp?" he asked quietly. "I thought all kids loved summer camp," Robert replied. Nathan shook his head. "Jessica always sent me to academic achievers. We had to wear uniforms and couldn't talk at lunch." Robert stared at his son, once again confronted with how much had been happening right under his nose. Academic achievers was indeed prestigious, essentially summer school disguised as enrichment, where Boston's elite competed to have their children admitted. He'd written the checks without question, assuming it was what was best for Nathan's future. "What would you like to do this summer?" he asked instead. Nathan looked up, suspicious of the question. "I get to choose." "Within reason," Robert smiled. "No building rocket ships in the living room." The look of pure joy that spread across Nathan's face was worth every board meeting Robert would miss that summer. Together they planned what Nathan dubbed their Summer of Awesome, a mix of day camps focused on art and sports, family trips to nearby beaches, and plenty of unstructured time for simply being together. On the first official day of summer break, Robert took Nathan to the office to meet the team properly. Unlike the previous rushed visits where Nathan had been expected to sit quietly in Robert's office, this time they toured the entire building. Robert introduced his son with pride to developers, designers, and the support staff who kept Mitchell Technologies running. Nathan was particularly fascinated by the creative department, where designers worked on user interfaces for the company's security software. Alison Cruz, the head designer, spent nearly an hour showing Nathan how she created digital mock-ups, even helping him design a superhero logo on her tablet. "You've got a natural eye for color," she told Nathan, who beamed at the praise. Later, as they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Nathan clutched his printed superhero design and looked thoughtfully at Robert. "Dad, what does Jessica do now?" The question caught Robert off guard. They rarely spoke of Jessica, though Dr. Thompson had assured him it was healthy for Nathan to process what had happened rather than pretending his stepmother had never existed. "She moved back to Connecticut, where she grew up," Robert answered truthfully. The updates from their lawyers had been minimal since Jessica had chosen not to contest the final custody arrangement. "She's getting some help from doctors, like Dr. Thompson, but for adults," Nathan nodded, processing this. "Is she still mad at me?" Robert knelt down, facing his son directly. "Nathan, listen to me. Jessica was never really mad at you. She has problems that made her treat you badly. But none of it was because of anything you did wrong. Then why did she do it?" The simple question held the complexity of adult behavior that no child should have to comprehend. "Sometimes adults get very confused about what's important," Robert said carefully. "They focus on the wrong things and make bad choices. Jessica wanted things to be perfect on the outside, even if they weren't good on the inside." Nathan considered this. "Like when she made me change clothes if someone was coming over, even if mine were clean." "Exactly like that," Robert confirmed, once again struck by the small revelations of controlling behavior that continued to emerge. As they exited the building, Nathan took Robert's hand, a gesture that had once been rare but now came naturally. "I like our life better now," he said decisively. "Even if my socks don't always match." Summer unfolded in a kaleidoscope of experiences. Nathan thrived at Camp Wilderness, returning home daily with dirty clothes and excited stories about salamanders found and forts built. His previously thin frame filled out as regular meals, and constant activity replaced the restricted access to food he'd endured under Jessica's care. The nightmares that had initially plagued him grew less frequent, though he still occasionally crawled into Robert's bed during thunderstorms. Dr. Thompson continued meeting with both of them, separately and together. "Nathan's making textbook progress," she assured Robert during one of their sessions. "Children who've experienced emotional neglect often struggle with believing they're worthy of care. Your consistency is rebuilding that foundation." "And what about the long-term effects?" Robert asked. The question that haunted his late-night thoughts. Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Children are remarkably resilient, especially when the period of trauma is followed by proper support. Nathan has that now. He has you, he has therapy, he has a safe environment where his needs are met. Those factors significantly reduce the likelihood of lasting damage. Robert nodded, though the guilt of having missed the signs for so long still weighed heavily. I keep thinking about the times I wasn't there, when she was... He couldn't finish the sentence. You can't change the past, Robert, Sarah said gently, but every day now, you're changing Nathan's future. Mid-July brought a milestone, Nathan's 8th birthday. Under Jessica's regime, birthdays had been formal affairs with hired event planners and guests selected for social connections rather than friendship. This year, Robert asked Nathan what he wanted. A real party, Nathan had replied immediately, with kids from camp and a chocolate cake and games where we can get messy. The birthday party that materialized in Boston Common was gloriously chaotic. A dozen 8-year-olds raced through sprinklers set up by the Parks Department, competed in 3-legged races that dissolved into giggling pile-ups, and devoured a chocolate cake that Robert had baked himself, with slightly lopsided results that Nathan declared perfect. Parents who had known Jessica sat awkwardly at first, clearly uncertain how to engage with Robert after the hushed rumors of the custody case had spread through Boston's upper circles. But as the afternoon progressed, genuine conversations replaced polite small talk. Melissa O'Connor, mother of Nathan's new friend Tyler, approached Robert as he was serving cake. "Tyler talks about Nathan constantly," she said warmly. "They've become inseparable at camp." "Nathan mentions Tyler every day too," Robert smiled. "We should arrange a playdate outside of camp sometime." Melissa nodded, then hesitated. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I always found Jessica rather intimidating at school functions. You seem much more approachable." "I've been learning to be more present," Robert admitted, "in all aspects of life." As the party wound down, with tired children being collected by parents, Robert found Nathan sitting under a tree with Tyler, solemnly exchanging friendship bracelets made at camp. "Best birthday ever, Dad," Nathan declared on the walk home, his pockets stuffed with small treasures from the day. That night, after Nathan had fallen asleep surrounded by his new presents, Robert sat on the balcony overlooking Boston's twinkling skyline. He thought about how his definition of success had fundamentally shifted. 6 months ago, his focus had been on Mitchell Technologies, market valuation, and potential expansion into European markets. Now, success was measured in his son's growing confidence, in nightmare-free nights, in the simple joy of seeing Nathan eat without first asking permission. The thought brought him back to Jessica. The court-mandated psychological evaluation had diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder, complicated by unresolved grief over her sister's death. The psychologist's report had detailed how Jessica had likely viewed Nathan as both a connection to her lost sister and a threat to her new position. The combination had created the perfect storm of emotional abuse, hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of devoted stepmotherhood. Robert's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Wu. "Japanese investors on board. Contract ready for review when you're in tomorrow." A few months ago, this news would have been the highlight of his week. Now, it was simply work, important, but no longer defining. He typed a quick reply, then set the phone aside and breathed in the summer evening. The penthouse had always offered spectacular views, but for the first time, Robert felt he was truly seeing the beauty of his city, the same way he was finally seeing what mattered most in his life. August brought another change. Jennifer Wu, who had been brilliantly managing Mitchell Technologies in Robert's reduced role, approached him with an unexpected proposal. "I want to formalize our current arrangement," she said during one of their weekly meetings. "You as chairman, me as CEO, permanently." Robert was surprised. You've been doing an outstanding job, but I always assumed it was temporary." Jennifer leaned forward. "Robert, the company hasn't just survived during your step back, it's thrived. My management style complements the foundation you built. And more importantly," she hesitated, then continued with characteristic directness, "you seem happier now, more balanced. The work you're doing from a strategic level is actually more valuable than when you were drowning in daily operations." She wasn't wrong. The company's stock had climbed steadily under her leadership, and Robert's targeted involvement in key decisions and relationship management had proven a more effective use of his skills. "I'd need to think about it," he said slowly. Of course, Jennifer nodded. Shasu, but consider this. The role you've carved out for yourself these past months. It's sustainable. You can be the father Nathan needs and still contribute significantly to the company. Why go back to 80-hour weeks when this model is working for everyone? That evening, as he helped Nathan with a complex Lego structure, Robert considered Jennifer's proposal. His son was happily narrating an elaborate story about the spaceship they were building, completely unself-conscious in a way he never would have been months ago. "Hey, Nathan," Robert said during a pause in the construction, "what would you think if Dad kept working like this, coming home early, having more time together, but still going to the office sometimes?" Nathan looked up, his expression serious. "You mean you wouldn't go back to being gone all the time?" The simple question cut to the heart of the matter. "That's right. I'd keep a schedule more like what we have now." Nathan carefully attached another piece to their creation. "I like when you're home," he said simply. By the end of August, the decision was made. Robert Mitchell would remain chairman of Mitchell Technologies, focusing on strategic direction and key relationships, while Jennifer Wu would assume the CEO position permanently. The business press had a field day with the announcement, some questioning whether Mitchell was being pushed out, others speculating about personal problems. Robert ignored the noise, knowing that those who mattered understood. As summer wound down and the approach of a new school year brought fresh anxieties, Robert noticed Nathan becoming quieter, more withdrawn. The progress they'd made seemed suddenly fragile. "What's bothering you, buddy?" Robert asked one evening as they walked along the Charles River, watching boats return to the docks. Nathan kicked at a pebble. "School's starting soon." "Are you worried about having a new teacher? Mrs. Peterson is supposed to be excellent." "It's not that." Nathan stopped walking, his expression troubled. "Last year, when Jessica was in charge of school stuff, she told everyone not to believe me if I said things about home. She said I had an overactive imagination." Robert felt a familiar surge of anger, quickly suppressed for Nathan's sake. "Is that why you never told your teacher what was happening?" Nathan nodded miserably. "She said no one would believe me anyway because you were important and gave money to the school." The calculated nature of Jessica's isolation tactics still had the power to shock Robert. She had systematically cut off every potential avenue of help for Nathan, ensuring his silence through a combination of fear and hopelessness. "Things are different now," Robert said firmly, kneeling to Nathan's level. "I've already spoken with your new principal and teacher. They know what happened, and they know that you should always be listened to. And I'll be at every school event, every conference, every recital, not sending Jessica in my place. Promise." Nathan's voice was small. "I promise. And you know what? I think we should go meet your teacher before school starts. We can see your new classroom together and introduce ourselves properly." The visit to Commonwealth Elementary the following day marked another turning point. Principal Adams greeted them personally. Having been briefed on Nathan's situation during the custody proceedings, Mrs. Peterson, Nathan's third-grade teacher, spent nearly an hour showing him the classroom library, science corner, and the special responsibility chart where each student would have weekly duties. "I love having helpers who can feed our class fish," she told Nathan, who brightened considerably at the prospect. As they were preparing to leave, Nathan tugged at Robert's sleeve. "Can I show you something, Dad?" He led Robert to a display case in the main hallway, filled with student artwork from the previous year. In the back corner was a small, carefully constructed diorama, a paper forest scene with tiny animals hidden among the trees. "I made this," Nathan said quietly. "Jessica didn't come to the art show, and when I asked if you could come, she said you were too busy. It won second place." Robert stared at the intricate creation, another moment lost that he could never reclaim. "It's incredible, Nathan. You have Mom's artistic talent." Nathan's face lit up at the comparison. "Really? Really? She used to paint landscapes that made you feel like you could walk right into them. I have some of her work in storage. We should hang it up at home." "Next to my drawings?" Nathan asked hopefully. "Absolutely. Artists should be displayed together." That night, as Robert tucked Nathan into bed, the boy seemed more relaxed than he had in days. "Dad?" he asked sleepily. Or do you think Mum would be happy about how things are now? Robert smoothed Nathan's hair gently. I know she would. She wanted nothing more than for you to be happy and safe. And what about Jessica? Will she ever be part of our family again? The question caught Robert off guard. Despite everything Jessica had done, Nathan's capacity for concern continued to amaze him. I don't think so, buddy, he answered honestly. Some hurts are too big to fix. But she's getting help, and that's what matters. Nathan nodded, accepting this with the resilience that still sometimes took Robert's breath away. That's okay. We're good, just us. As Nathan drifted to sleep, Robert remained sitting on the edge of the bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of his son's chest. In the dim glow of the nightlight, he could see traces of Emily in their son's features, the curve of his cheek, the sweep of eyelashes against skin. He thought about how differently things might have unfolded if he hadn't come home early that night, if he hadn't seen Nathan searching for food in the garbage. The moment haunted him still, not just the image of his hungry son, but the realization of how completely he had failed to see what was happening in his own home. His mind went back to Dr. Thompson's words from one of their early sessions. Emotional abuse leaves no visible bruises. It happens in the shadows. Behind closed doors, even the most attentive people can miss it. But he hadn't been attentive, Robert acknowledged to himself. He had been absent, physically present for dinners and bedtimes when his schedule allowed, but emotionally disconnected, delegating the actual parenting to Jessica while he focused on building his empire. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very success he'd pursued so relentlessly, believing it would secure Nathan's future, had nearly destroyed his son's present. Tomorrow would bring another day of their new life, school shopping for supplies, a planned lunch with Tyler and his mum, an afternoon video call with the London office. Balance, not perfection. Presence, not just provision. These were the lessons Robert continued to learn. As he finally rose to leave Nathan's room, his son stirred slightly. Love you, Dad, Nathan murmured, half asleep. Love you too, buddy, Robert whispered back. More than anything. It was the simplest truth he knew. And finally, he was living it. Agora vou criar o terceiro capítulo. The first autumn leaves were turning Boston Common into a tapestry of red and gold when Robert received the email from Jessica's attorney. He was sitting in his home office, reviewing quarterly projections while waiting for Nathan to return from a playdate at Tyler's house. The subject line was clinical. Request for modification of visitation order. Parker v. Mitchell. Robert's stomach tightened as he opened the message. After nearly 6 months of silence, Jessica was requesting supervised visitation with Nathan. According to her attorney, she had completed the court-mandated psychological treatment program, maintained consistent therapy for half a year, and was deemed by her psychiatric team to be making significant progress in addressing her underlying issues. The legal language was dispassionate, but the implications sent Robert's mind racing. He hadn't prepared for this possibility, at least not so soon. In his darker moments, he had imagined Jessica simply disappearing from their lives permanently, moving across the country or even abroad. The reality of her continued existence in Boston's social periphery had been easy to ignore while she remained legally barred from contact. The sound of the front door opening pulled him from his thoughts. "Dad, I'm home," Nathan called, his voice echoing through the penthouse. Robert closed his laptop and pushed the email from his mind. Later, he told himself, he would deal with it later. Nathan bounded into the office, cheeks flushed from the crisp fall air. Clutching a model airplane. "Look what Tyler's dad helped us build. It actually flies." "That's incredible," Robert said, examining the balsa wood creation with appropriate awe. "We should test it at the park this weekend." "Tyler's dad says there's a model airplane club that meets on Saturdays. Can we go, please?" Nathan's eyes shone with excitement. "Of course we can," Robert smiled, marveling at how easily Nathan now asked for things he wanted, a stark contrast to the hesitant child who had once feared making any request. After dinner, with Nathan absorbed in his homework at the kitchen table, Robert retreated to his office to call Rachel Bennett. His attorney answered on the second ring. "I was expecting your call," she said without preamble. "You've seen Jessica's petition." Yes. What's your assessment? Rachel sighed. She's followed the letter of the court's requirements. 6 months of consistent therapy, completion of the anger management program, the parenting classes, her psychiatric evaluation shows improvement in recognizing her controlling behaviors. And you believe that? Robert couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. What I believe isn't relevant, Rachel replied pragmatically. So what matters is that she's checked every box the court set out as prerequisites for revisiting visitation. Judge Winters will look at this request seriously. Robert ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. It's been half a year, Rachel. Does anyone really think that's enough time to fundamentally change someone with her issues? The goal of the court isn't to keep parents permanently separated from children unless absolutely necessary, Rachel reminded him. The presumption is that family reunification, when safely possible, serves the child's best interests. Nathan is thriving now, Robert argued. His nightmares have almost stopped. He's making friends, doing well in school. Why risk all that progress? Which is exactly the argument we'll make, Rachel assured him. But we need to be prepared for the possibility that the judge will grant some form of highly supervised visitation, perhaps in a therapeutic setting with Dr. Thompson present. After ending the call, Robert sat in the darkening office, watching Boston's lights flicker on across the harbor. The thought of telling Nathan that Jessica wanted to see him again twisted his stomach into knots. How could he explain this to an 8-year-old who had only recently begun to feel truly safe? Dad? Nathan's voice came from the doorway. Are you okay? You look worried. Robert beckoned his son into the room, making room for him on the leather office chair. I'm just thinking about some grown-up stuff. Nathan leaned against him. Work stuff or family stuff? The perceptiveness still caught Robert off guard sometimes. Family stuff, he admitted. Nathan nodded solemnly. Is it about me? Why would you think that? Because you get a special worried face when it's about me? Different from your work-worried face. Robert couldn't help but smile despite his concerns. You're pretty observant, you know that. Mrs. Peterson says I notice details others miss, like how I knew Tyler was sad yesterday even though he said he was fine. Robert hesitated, weighing Dr. Thompson's advice about honesty against his instinct to protect Nathan from difficult news. It is about you, buddy. It's about our family situation. Nathan tensed slightly against him. Is it about Jessica? The direct question left no room for evasion. Yes, her lawyers sent a letter saying she'd like to see you sometimes. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Do I have to? No decisions have been made yet, Robert assured him, choosing his words carefully. And your feelings about this are very important. We'll talk with Dr. Thompson about it, and the judge will listen to what you want. Would you be there too, if I had to see her? Absolutely. You wouldn't be alone with her. Robert tightened his arm around Nathan's shoulders. And it might not happen at all. It's just something we might need to think about. Nathan seemed to accept this, though Robert noticed him biting his lower lip, a habit that emerged when he was anxious. Can I sleep in your room tonight? Of course, Robert said immediately, recognizing the request for the security it represented. Later that night, with Nathan finally asleep beside him, Robert stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. The progress they'd made felt suddenly fragile, threatened by Jessica's re-emergence. He thought back to the custody hearing, to the evidence that had seemed so irrefutable, the security footage, Mrs. Wilson's testimony, the psychological evaluation showing Nathan's trauma responses. How could any of that be erased by 6 months of therapy? The next morning brought a call from Dr. Thompson, who had also received notification about Jessica's petition. I'd like to see both of you today if possible, she said. Nathan should be part of this conversation, in an age-appropriate way. That afternoon, in the familiar comfort of Dr. Thompson's office with its bright watercolors and comfortable couches, Nathan sat between Robert and the therapist, legs swinging nervously. Nathan, your dad told you about the letter from Jessica's lawyer, right? Dr. Thompson began gently. Nathan nodded, his eyes fixed on the model sailboat displayed on the bookshelf. I want to know how you feel about possibly seeing Jessica again. There are no wrong answers here. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Would she be different now? The simple question held layers of complexity. Dr. Thompson chose her words carefully. People can change their behavior with help and hard work. Jessica has been getting help for the ways she treated you unfairly. But what if she's just pretending? Nathan's voice dropped to a whisper. She was good at pretending before. Robert felt a surge of protective anger, coupled with pride at his son's insight. That's a really good question, Dr. Thompson acknowledged, and it's why, if any visits happen, they would be in a special room with someone like me watching the whole time. Your safety and comfort are the most important things. Nathan seemed to consider this. Would I have to go back to living with her sometimes? No, Robert interjected firmly. That's not what this is about. You live with me. Period. Dr. Thompson nodded in agreement. This would just be about short visits, to see if Jessica has really changed and if having some contact with her might eventually be good for you. I don't think it would be good for me, Nathan said with surprising clarity. She made me feel bad all the time, like I was always doing everything wrong. Robert exchanged glances with Dr. Thompson, who gave him a slight nod of encouragement. Nathan, Robert said gently, I promise you won't have to do anything that doesn't feel safe. Dr. Thompson and I and the judge all want what's best for you. Can I think about it? Nathan asked, his expression serious beyond his years. Of course, Dr. Thompson smiled. That's a very mature response. As October progressed, the legal machinery ground forward. Rachel prepared their response to Jessica's petition, arguing that any visitation would be premature and potentially damaging to Nathan's recovery. Dr. Thompson provided a carefully worded assessment, acknowledging Jessica's treatment progress while expressing concerns about reintroducing her into Nathan's life too quickly. Meanwhile, Robert tried to maintain normalcy. Nathan continued his weekly playdates with Tyler, joined the school's junior chess club, and showed increasing interest in the model airplane hobby he'd discovered through Tyler's father. Their Saturdays at the Boston Model Aircraft Association became a cherished ritual, with Nathan learning to launch his increasingly sophisticated creations while Robert chatted with the other parents on the sidelines. It was during one of these Saturday outings that Robert noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the field. Jessica Parker, elegant as always in a camel coat and boots, was watching them from a distance. Their eyes met briefly across the expanse of grass before she turned and walked away. The encounter, though brief, left Robert shaken. He scanned the area for Nathan, finding him safely engaged with the club's instructor, completely unaware of his stepmother's presence. The sighting wasn't illegal. The restraining order prevented Jessica from approaching or contacting Nathan, not from being in public spaces, but the deliberateness of it felt like a message. That evening, he called Rachel to report the incident. It's concerning, but not actionable, she confirmed after listening to his account. Unless she approached Nathan or tried to communicate with him, she hasn't violated any court orders. It wasn't coincidence, Rachel. She knew exactly where we would be. Boston is a small city in some ways, especially in certain social circles, Rachel pointed out, but I'll make note of it in our case file. If it happens again, document the time and place. The following week brought an unwelcome development. Judge Winters had scheduled a hearing to consider Jessica's petition. More disturbingly, the court had appointed an independent evaluator to assess Nathan's current well-being and his readiness for potential supervised contact with Jessica. It's standard procedure, Rachel assured Robert over coffee at his office. Dr. Levine is well respected and thorough. He'll spend time with Nathan, with you, and review all the previous case materials before making his recommendation. And if he recommends against visitation, then the judge will likely deny Jessica's petition, at least for now. And if he doesn't, Robert couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Rachel met his gaze directly. Then we prepare Nathan as best we can for limited, supervised visits. But Robert, you need to be careful about projecting your anxiety. Children are incredibly perceptive. Robert knew she was right. He had noticed Nathan watching him closely whenever the subject of Jessica or the court case arose, calibrating his own reactions to his father's emotional state. Dr. Levine's evaluation process extended over several weeks. He interviewed Robert extensively about Nathan's progress since the custody ruling. observed father and son together during a typical evening routine, and spent time with Nathan alone, using play therapy techniques to assess his emotional state. During the final session, Dr. Levine invited Robert into his office while Nathan waited with the receptionist. "I want to be transparent with you, Mr. Mitchell," the evaluator began. "Nathan is a remarkably resilient child who has clearly benefited from the stability and attention you've provided over these past months. The transformation from the traumatized boy, described in the original case files, to the child I've observed is significant." Robert nodded, allowing himself a moment of pride despite his anxiety about the evaluation's conclusion. "That said, I've also reviewed Jessica Parker's treatment records, interviews with her current therapist, and had several sessions with her directly. Her progress appears genuine. She demonstrates insight into her previous controlling behaviors and the narcissistic patterns that drove her treatment of Nathan." Robert felt his jaw tighten. "With all due respect, Dr. Levine, people with narcissistic personality disorders are exceptionally good at presenting what others want to see." "I'm well aware of that clinical reality," Dr. Levine replied evenly, "which is why my recommendation to the court will be for extremely limited therapeutic visitation only, initially 1 hour per month in my office, with both myself and Dr. Thompson present." It wasn't the complete denial of visitation Robert had hoped for, but it was far more restrictive than he had feared. "And Nathan? What does he say about seeing her?" Nathan expresses understandable anxiety, but also curiosity. He has questions that only Jessica can answer, particularly about his mother, Emily, and the family history they share. Dr. Levine leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Mitchell, part of Nathan's healing involves making sense of what happened to him. For some children, controlled contact with a reformed abuser under the right circumstances can actually be empowering." The court date arrived on a grey November morning. Robert had arranged for Nathan to spend the day with Melissa and Tyler, wanting to shield him from the stress of the proceedings. The courtroom was nearly empty. Family court matters were kept private, with only essential personnel present. Jessica sat at the opposite table with her attorney, a distinguished older man known for handling high-profile divorce cases. She looked thinner than Robert remembered, her usual perfect composure slightly frayed around the edges. When their eyes met briefly, he was surprised to see not the cold calculation he expected, but something that looked almost like genuine remorse. Judge Winters, now familiar with their case, reviewed the new filings efficiently. Both attorneys presented their arguments, Jessica's lawyer emphasizing her consistent therapy attendance and the psychiatric evaluations showing improvement, while Rachel highlighted Nathan's ongoing recovery and the potential risks of reintroducing contact too soon. When Dr. Levine presented his evaluation, he balanced his assessment carefully. "In my professional opinion, extremely limited therapeutic visitation presents minimal risk to Nathan Mitchell's well-being, while potentially offering benefits in terms of processing his experiences and answering questions about his maternal family history." Before making her ruling, Judge Winters looked directly at Jessica. "Ms. Parker, do you wish to make a statement to the court?" Jessica rose, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped a sheet of paper. "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice was softer than Robert remembered, lacking the polished confidence he'd known. "I understand that words mean very little in light of my actions," she began, "but I want the court to know that I accept full responsibility for the harm I caused Nathan. The therapy these past months has helped me recognize the depth of my failure, not just as a stepmother, but as a human being." She paused, seeming to struggle with emotion. "I lost my sister, Emily, and in my grief and selfishness, I punished her son instead of honoring her by caring for him properly. I don't expect forgiveness, and I understand the skepticism about whether people like me can truly change. All I ask is the chance to show Nathan, in whatever limited way the court deems appropriate, that he was never the problem. I was." Robert watched her carefully, searching for signs of the practiced performance he had come to recognize, but something in Jessica's demeanor seemed different, a rawness that hadn't been there before, an absence of the perfect facade she had always maintained. Judge Winters considered her statement, then delivered her ruling. Jessica would be permitted 1 hour supervised visits with Nathan once monthly, in Dr. Levine's office, with Dr. Thompson also present. The visits would be recorded, and Nathan could end them at any time if he felt uncomfortable. After 3 months, the arrangement would be reassessed based on Nathan's responses and the therapist's observations. "This is a tentative first step, Miss Parker," the judge emphasized. "The priority remains Nathan's well-being, not your desire for reconciliation. Is that understood?" "Completely, Your Honor," Jessica replied quietly. As they left the courtroom, Robert found himself walking alongside Jessica in the hallway. For a moment they were alone, the attorneys having moved ahead to discuss procedural details. "Robert," Jessica said softly, stopping him with a light touch on his sleeve, "I know you have every reason to doubt me, but I am truly sorry for what I did to Nathan." Robert studied the woman who had once shared his home, his life. The perfectly maintained appearance that had been her armor was diminished, her hair simpler, her face bare of the careful makeup she had never been seen without. "It's not me you need to convince," he said finally. "It's Nathan. And if these visits cause him any distress, any at all, they stop immediately." Jessica nodded. "I understand. I just want a chance to tell him it wasn't his fault. He deserves to know that." As Robert walked away, he found himself in the unfamiliar position of uncertainty. The Jessica he had known would have approached this situation as a competition to be won, another social performance to perfect. This Jessica seemed different. Whether the change was genuine or simply a more sophisticated level of manipulation remained to be seen. That evening, as he explained the court's decision to Nathan over dinner, he watched his son's reactions carefully. Nathan pushed his pasta around his plate, absorbing the news. "So I have to see her, but only for a little while, and you'll be right outside the room." "That's right," Robert confirmed, "and Dr. Thompson and Dr. Levine will be right there with you. You can leave any time you want." Nathan considered this. What if she's mean again? The doctors won't let that happen, and if you feel uncomfortable for any reason, even if you can't explain why, you just say you want to stop. No one will be upset with you. What if she wants me to live with her again?" "That's not going to happen," Robert assured him firmly. The judge was very clear about that. "This is just about short visits to talk." Nathan nodded slowly. "I have some questions I want to ask her." "What kind of questions, buddy?" "About Mom? About why she did those things to me?" Nathan's voice was small but steady. "Tyler says when people do mean things, you should ask them why so you can understand." Robert felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride at his son's thoughtfulness, sadness that he had to process such difficult realities at his age, and a reluctant acknowledgement that perhaps Dr. Levine was right. Maybe Nathan did need this opportunity, on his own terms and in a completely safe environment, to confront the person who had hurt him. "Those are good questions," Robert said carefully, "and you deserve answers. But remember, sometimes adults don't have good reasons for the bad things they do." "Dr. Thompson says hurt people sometimes hurt people," Nathan replied, displaying the insight he'd gained through his therapy sessions. "That's often true. But it doesn't make the hurt they cause okay." Nathan pushed his plate away, apparently finished with both his dinner and the conversation. "Can we watch a movie tonight? The new space one?" The abrupt change of subject was typical of how Nathan processed difficult information, absorbing what he could handle, then switching to something comforting when he needed a break. It was a healthy coping mechanism Dr. Thompson had encouraged. "Absolutely," Robert smiled, standing to clear their plates. "You get the popcorn started." As he watched Nathan measure popcorn kernels with careful precision, a task that once would have been forbidden under Jessica's reign of perfection and control, Robert felt a cautious optimism. Whatever happened with these supervised visits, Nathan was no longer the frightened, silent child he had been. He had found his voice, his confidence, and perhaps most importantly, his trust in the adults, who now truly had his best interests at heart. The first visit was scheduled for early December, when Boston would be decorated for the holidays and a dusting of snow would likely cover the common. Robert had time to prepare Nathan, to work with Dr. Thompson on strategies for managing anxiety, to remind his son repeatedly that his feelings and boundaries would be respected. What he couldn't prepare for was his own emotional response to seeing Jessica and Nathan in the same room again, even under the most controlled circumstances. That, he realized, would require its own kind of bravery, the willingness to acknowledge that healing rarely followed a straight line, and that sometimes moving forward meant first circling back to face what had been left unresolved. Finalmente. Vou criar o quarto e último capítulo. December arrived in Boston with a theatrical flourish, a perfect snowfall that transformed the city overnight, coating Beacon Hill's brick sidewalks and the iron fences of the Common with a pristine white blanket. Nathan pressed his face against the penthouse windows in the early morning light, his breath fogging the glass as he tracked the patterns of snowplows on the streets below. "Do you think they'll cancel school?" he asked hopefully, as Robert placed a mug of hot chocolate on the windowsill beside him. "Not a chance," Robert smiled. "This is Boston. We'd need a full-blown blizzard for that, but maybe we can go sledding this weekend if the snow sticks around." Nathan nodded absently, his attention still focused on the winter scene outside. Robert recognized the distraction for what it was. Not just childhood snow excitement, but anxiety about the afternoon ahead. Today marked Nathan's first supervised visit with Jessica. Over breakfast, Robert kept the conversation light, discussing Nathan's upcoming class holiday concert and the science project they'd been working on together. Only as they prepared to leave for school did he gently broach the subject. "Remember, I'll pick you up early today for your appointment with Dr. Levine." Nathan zipped his coat with more concentration than the task required. "And Jessica will be there." "Yes, but Dr. Thompson will be right with you the whole time, and I'll be just outside the door. 1 hour, that's all." "I know," Nathan said, shouldering his backpack. "I've been practicing what I want to say with Dr. Thompson." Robert felt a surge of pride at his son's courage, mixed with a lingering uneasiness about the entire situation. "You can say as much or as little as you want. There's no right or wrong way to handle this." The school day passed in a blur of client calls and strategic planning sessions that Robert could barely focus on. By the time he arrived at Commonwealth Elementary to sign Nathan out early, his stomach was in knots, a reaction he took pains to conceal as Nathan approached, lunchbox in hand and winter coat half-buttoned. "Hey, buddy, ready to go?" Nathan nodded, his expression serious. "Mrs. Peterson gave me today's homework already, and Tyler said he'd call me later to tell me what I missed in science." The mundane details of school life continued, regardless of the emotional complexities they were navigating, a fact Robert found oddly reassuring. They drove through Boston's slushy streets to Dr. Levine's office building near Massachusetts General Hospital, arriving 20 minutes early at Robert's deliberate planning. Dr. Thompson met them in the waiting room, her calm presence an immediate balm. "I thought we could have a few minutes together before Jessica arrives," she explained, leading them to a small consultation room furnished with comfortable chairs and a table stocked with art supplies. "How are you feeling, Nathan?" she asked once they were settled. Nathan shrugged, picking up a colored pencil and rolling it between his fingers. "Nervous and kind of mad, but also curious." "Those are all completely normal feelings," Dr. Thompson assured him. "Remember what we practiced. If you start feeling overwhelmed, you can use our code word." "A spaceship," Nathan nodded. "And then we take a break or stop completely." "Exactly. And there's no pressure to talk about anything you don't want to discuss. This is your time, Nathan." Robert listened to their exchange, once again grateful for the careful preparation Dr. Thompson had invested in making this encounter as safe as possible for Nathan. When Dr. Levine appeared in the doorway to announce Jessica's arrival, Robert felt his own heart rate accelerate. "I'll be right outside," he promised Nathan, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze before reluctantly leaving the room. The next hour was among the longest of Robert's life. He sat in the waiting area, attempting to review work emails on his phone, but instead finding himself straining to hear any sound from behind the closed door. Dr. Levine had explained that the session would be video recorded for legal purposes, but there was no live feed Robert could monitor. Halfway through the allotted time, the door opened, and Dr. Thompson emerged. Robert stood immediately, anxiety spiking. "Everything's okay," she assured him quickly. Nathan asked for a short break, but he wants to continue. He's doing remarkably well. "What's happening in there?" Robert couldn't help asking. Dr. Thompson considered her response carefully, balancing professional discretion with Robert's parental concern. "They're talking. Jessica has apologized directly to Nathan for specific incidents he remembers. He's asking her questions, and she's answering without defensiveness. And you believe her?" Robert kept his voice low, aware of the receptionist not far away. "In this context, with the safeguards we have in place, whether I believe her is less important than whether the interaction is beneficial for Nathan." She paused, then added, "But yes, her responses appear genuine. The work she's done in therapy is evident." Before Robert could press further, Dr. Thompson returned to the session room, leaving him to his thoughts. When the hour finally concluded, Dr. Levine emerged first, followed by Jessica. She looked drained, her eyes reddened, but she nodded briefly to Robert before being escorted to a separate exit by Dr. Levine, part of the carefully orchestrated protocol to ensure Nathan wouldn't feel pressured by additional interaction. Nathan appeared a moment later with Dr. Thompson, his expression thoughtful but not distressed. Robert resisted the urge to pepper him with questions as they collected their coats and headed to the parking garage. Only when they were settled in the car did he ask, "How did it go, buddy?" Nathan gazed out at the snow-covered city. "It was weird. She looks different now." "Different how?" "Less perfect," Nathan said, after considering his words. "She cried when I told her about finding food in the trash that night." Robert gripped the steering wheel tighter, the memory still raw. "Did she explain why she treated you that way?" "She said after Mom died. She got really mixed up inside. That she was jealous because you loved Mom first and you loved me because I was part of Mom." Nathan recounted this with the direct simplicity of a child, repeating an adult concept. "She said she wanted everything to be perfect so you would love her more, but it made her angry all the time, and she took it out on me." Robert struggled to find the right response. "That's a complicated adult problem that she never should have put on you." That's what Dr. Thompson said too, and Jessica said it wasn't an excuse, just an explanation. Nathan turned to look at Robert directly. "She said she's sorry she ruined our family." "You didn't ask for any of this," Robert said gently. "None of it was your fault." "I know that now." There was a certainty in Nathan's voice that hadn't been there months ago. "Ori, can we get ice cream?" The abrupt shift was so quintessentially 8-year-old that Robert had to smile despite the emotional weight of the day. "Ice cream? It's 30 degrees outside. Tyler says ice cream tastes better when it's cold out because it doesn't melt as fast." "Well, we can't argue with that scientific reasoning," Robert conceded, making a detour toward their favorite ice cream shop in Back Bay. Over the following weeks, Nathan spoke of the visit occasionally, usually in passing references that surprised Robert with their matter-of-factness. Jessica said Mom used to collect snow globes, he might mention while working on homework. Or, "I told Jessica about winning the chess tournament. She said that was really good." Dr. Thompson assured Robert that this integration of the experience into everyday conversation was healthy, a sign that Nathan was processing the interaction without it becoming an outsized presence in his life. The second supervised visit, scheduled for January B, approached with significantly less anxiety from both father and son. This time, when Robert picked Nathan up afterward, he seemed almost energized. "Jessica brought pictures of Mom from when they were kids," he announced as he buckled his seatbelt. "Dr. Levine is making copies so I can keep them." "That was thoughtful of her," Robert managed, surprised by the gesture. "There was one where Mom was about my age, riding a horse at their grandparents' farm. Jessica says I have her same smile." The comparison caught Robert off guard. It was true. Nathan had inherited Emily's wide, slightly crooked smile that lit up her entire face. It was a resemblance he had noted himself countless times, but hearing it had come from Jessica carried a strange poignancy. "You absolutely do have her smile," he agreed softly. As winter gave way to early spring, the monthly visits continued. Each time, Nathan returned with another piece of family history or memory of Emily that Jessica had shared. Stories from their childhood in Connecticut, traditions their family had kept, small details about Emily that even Robert hadn't known. It was as if Jessica, in her careful, supervised way, was attempting to restore to Nathan the maternal heritage that had been severed first by Emily's passing and then by Jessica's own destructive behavior. Dr. Levine's 3-month assessment, delivered in a comprehensive report to the court, recommended continuing the supervised visitation schedule unchanged. Nathan Mitchell demonstrates improved emotional processing around his experiences with his stepmother, the report noted. The controlled contact appears to serve a positive purpose in his ongoing recovery, while Ms. Parker continues to demonstrate appropriate boundaries and genuine remorse. Robert discussed the report with Rachel over lunch at a quiet restaurant near his office. So nothing changes for now. That's right, Rachel confirmed. Same schedule. Same supervision requirements. Dr. Levine was quite explicit that while the visits are going well, removing any of the current safeguards would be premature. Robert nodded, relief mingling with a reluctant acknowledgement of his shifting perspective. Nathan seems almost better after each visit. I didn't expect that. Rachel regarded him thoughtfully. You know, when we first took on this case, you were rightfully focused on protecting Nathan from Jessica. But what's happening now might actually be the best protection of all. He's developing a framework for understanding what happened to him that doesn't require him to see himself as the cause. I worry sometimes, Robert admitted, about whether we can trust this change in her. That's why the supervision continues, Rachel reminded him. But Robert, people can change, not always, and certainly not easily, but sometimes the shock of facing the consequences of their actions creates an opening for genuine transformation. As spring blossomed across Boston, Nathan's 3rd grade year drew to a close. His final report card showed marked improvement across all subjects, with his teacher noting his increasing confidence in class participation and strong creative writing skills. The nightmares that had once been weekly occurrences now appeared only rarely, usually triggered by specific stressors like upcoming tests. One evening in late May, as Robert helped Nathan pack for a weekend class camping trip to the Berkshires, his first overnight school activity, Nathan brought up a subject that caught Robert completely off guard. Dad, do you think Jessica will ever get married again? Robert looked up from folding a sweatshirt. I don't know, buddy. Why do you ask? Nathan shrugged, sorting through his collection of flashlights to select the best one. She said she's going on dates sometimes now. Not with anyone serious, but she's trying to rejoin the world, whatever that means. The revelation that Jessica had moved into dating again shouldn't have surprised Robert. But somehow it did. In his mind, she had existed in a sort of suspended animation, the Jessica of the court case, the Jessica of the supervised visits, not a full person with an evolving life beyond those controlled interactions. Well, many people want to find someone to share their life with, he said carefully. It's natural that she might date again eventually. Nathan nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. Then, with the directness children often display, he asked, What about you, Dad? Don't you get lonely sometimes? The question struck Robert with unexpected force. He had been so focused on Nathan's healing, on rebuilding their life together, that he had pushed aside any consideration of his own personal life. The idea of dating had seemed not just logistically challenging, but somehow disloyal, though to whom he couldn't quite articulate. I have you, he said simply, and work, and our friends. I'm pretty lucky. Nathan gave him a look that seemed surprisingly knowing for an 8-year-old. Tyler's mom says you should get back out there. I heard her telling Tyler's dad after the model airplane competition. Robert felt heat rise to his face. Oh, she did she? Uh-huh. And Mrs. Peterson asked if you were coming to the class picnic alone or bringing a +1, whatever that is. A +1 is just an extra person you bring to an event, Robert explained, amused and mildly embarrassed by this insight into how he was apparently discussed among the parents and teachers in Nathan's life. So are you bringing one? Nathan persisted, testing the batteries in his chosen flashlight. No, it'll just be me cheering you on at the 3-legged race, Robert assured him, redirecting the conversation to the upcoming picnic activities. But Nathan's questions lingered in his mind that night after his son had fallen asleep, excitement for the camping trip making his slumber restless. Robert sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, contemplating the city lights and the path their lives had taken over the past year. From the depths of crisis, that shocking moment of discovery in the kitchen, they had emerged into something he wouldn't have dared hope for in those dark early days. Nathan was thriving, secure in the knowledge that he was loved and valued. The trauma remained part of his story, but increasingly, it was just that, a chapter, not the entire narrative. And what about his own story? Robert wondered. He had redefined himself as a father, restructured his professional life around his most important priority, built a support network of friends and professionals who had helped navigate the darkest times. But Nathan's innocent question had illuminated a space in his life he had deliberately left unexamined. The following weekend brought the end-of-year class picnic, a boisterous affair in a reserved section of the public garden. Robert chatted with other parents while keeping one eye on Nathan, who was engaged in an elaborate tag game with his classmates. The easy camaraderie among the adults was something he had only recently become comfortable with. Before, he had always been the busy CEO who appeared briefly at school functions, shook a few hands, and disappeared back to the office. "He's like a different child from last September," a voice observed beside him. Robert turned to find Melissa O'Connor, Tyler's mother, watching the children play. "The transformation has been remarkable to watch." "It's been quite a journey," Robert acknowledged, accepting the lemonade she offered from the refreshment table. "Tyler told me Nathan's seeing his stepmother occasionally now. That must be complicated." Robert nodded, appreciating her tact. The custody battle and its aftermath had inevitably become known among the school community, though most parents respected their privacy enough not to raise it directly. "It's been surprisingly positive, actually. Very controlled, very supervised, but it seems to be helping him process what happened." Melissa smiled. "Our children are incredible that way. Their capacity for healing puts us adults to shame sometimes." "Speaking of adults," Robert said, seizing an opening, "Nathan mentioned something about you thinking I should get back out there." Melissa's cheeks flushed slightly. "I'm going to have a word with my son about repeating private conversations." Robert laughed. To be fair, I think he was genuinely curious. It probably hasn't occurred to him before that his dad might date someday. "And will his dad?" Melissa asked, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Date someday?" "I haven't really thought about it," Robert admitted. "This past year has been so focused on Nathan, on our new normal." "Understandably so, but you know, being a good father doesn't mean putting your entire life on hold indefinitely. Nathan's doing well. You've established stability. Perhaps it's time to consider what else might be part of your story." Before Robert could respond, they were interrupted by Nathan and Tyler racing up, breathless with excitement about the upcoming sack race. The moment passed, but Melissa's words lingered. June brought Nathan's final supervised visit with Jessica before a summer break agreed upon by all parties. When Robert picked him up afterward, Nathan was quieter than usual, pensive in a way that prompted Robert to suggest a detour to their favorite spot along the Charles River. They sat on a bench, watching sailing classes navigate the water in small dinghies. "Everything okay with the visit?" Robert asked gently. Nathan nodded. "Jessica got me something. Dr. Levine said it was okay." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a delicate silver compass on a chain. It was Mom's. "Jessica said Mum always told her that no matter how lost you feel, you can find your way home." Robert felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. The compass had been his gift to Emily on their first anniversary, a reference to their love of hiking and her terrible sense of direction. That Jessica had kept it, and now returned it to Nathan, carried a significance that transcended their complicated history. "Your mum would want you to have that," he said softly. "It's perfect for you." "Jessica said something else too," Nathan continued, turning the compass over in his small hands. "She said that sometimes people make terrible mistakes, but that doesn't mean they're terrible forever, that people can learn and change if they really want to." "What do you think about that?" Robert asked, curious about his son's perspective. Nathan considered the question seriously. "I think she's different now. Not perfect or anything, but different, and I'm not scared of her anymore." He looked up at Robert. "Is that okay?" "That's more than okay," Robert assured him, draping an arm around his shoulders. That's pretty incredible, actually. As they walked back to the car, Nathan slipped his hand into Robert's, a gesture that had become natural again after months when such casual contact had been fraught with tension and fear. "Dad, I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "Buddy, maybe after summer, if Dr. Thompson thinks it's okay, maybe Jessica could come to one of my chess tournaments sometime. Not like to take me or anything," he added quickly, "but just to watch. Like, in the audience, where all the parents sit." The request was so unexpected that Robert had to take a moment to process it. "That would be a big change from the supervised visits," he said carefully. "What made you think of that?" Nathan shrugged. "She asks about chess every time we talk, and I told her about the tournament I won, and she seemed really interested. Not fake interested, real interested." Robert nodded, acknowledging the distinction that Nathan, with his hard-earned sensitivity to authenticity, was able to make. "Let's talk with Dr. Thompson about it when we get closer to the fall, okay? No promises, but we can discuss it." Nathan seemed satisfied with this response, his attention already shifting to a duck family paddling along the river's edge. But for Robert, the conversation marked yet another unexpected turn in a journey that continued to surprise him with its complexity. That evening, after Nathan was asleep, Robert found himself looking at old photos, something he had avoided in the difficult days following Emily's passing, and then again during the custody battle, when memories of their once hopeful family had been too painful to revisit. Among the digital albums, he found pictures from their wedding day, Emily radiant in a simple gown, Jessica beside her as maid of honor, both sisters laughing at some shared joke. There had been genuine love there once, he realized, between the sisters and in the early days of his relationship with Jessica, before grief and resentment had twisted her feelings into something darker. The recognition didn't excuse what had happened to Nathan, but it offered a more nuanced understanding of the human complexity behind the pain. As summer bloomed fully across Boston, Robert and Nathan settled into vacation routines, mornings at day camp for Nathan, afternoons and evenings together exploring the city's parks, museums, and beaches. On weekends, they sometimes drove north to Maine or south to Cape Cod, building the cache of shared experiences that would form Nathan's childhood memories. During a weekend trip to a small coastal town in Maine, they spent an afternoon exploring tide pools. Nathan crouched beside a particularly active one, carefully observing the tiny ecosystem within. "Dad," he called excitedly, "look at this hermit crab. He found a new shell." Robert knelt beside his son, watching the small creature navigate its new home. "Dr. Thompson says people are kind of like hermit crabs sometimes," Nathan commented, gently touching the water near the crab without disturbing it. "We outgrow our old shells and have to find new ones that fit better." "That's a pretty good analogy," Robert agreed, impressed as always by his son's ability to absorb and apply concepts from his therapy sessions. "I think we found better shells," Nathan said decisively, standing up and brushing sand from his knees. "And maybe Jessica did too." "Maybe she did," Robert acknowledged, seeing the wisdom in his child's simple assessment. As they walked back along the beach, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the sand, Nathan skipped ahead to examine a piece of sea glass. Robert watched him, confident, curious, increasingly secure, and felt a profound gratitude wash over him. They had weathered a storm that had threatened to destroy everything, and emerged not unchanged, but perhaps stronger for having navigated such treacherous waters. The future would bring new challenges, new adjustments, Nathan's continued healing, the evolving nature of their family structure, the potential for expanding their small circle to include new relationships someday. But Robert no longer feared these changes. They had found their compass, just as Emily had always said they could, and however the path twisted ahead, they would find their way forward together. By the time they returned to Boston, the city was preparing for its July 4th celebrations. From their penthouse balcony, they would have a perfect view of the fireworks over the Charles River, a tradition they had missed the previous year amid the custody proceedings. On the evening of the 4th, they hosted a small gathering, Tyler and his parents, Nathan's chess coach and his wife, Tay, and a few colleagues from Mitchell Technologies who had become friends over the past year. As darkness fell and the first colorful bursts appeared in the sky, Robert stood slightly apart, watching Nathan excitedly pointing out particularly spectacular explosions to Tyler. Melissa joined him, offering a glass of wine. "He's come so far," she observed, nodding toward Nathan. "We both have," Robert replied, accepting the drink with a smile of thanks. "Any update on the Nathan-initiated proposal about his stepmother attending events?" Robert nodded. "Dr. Thompson thinks it might actually be a positive step, with the right preparation and boundaries. We'll see how things look when chess tournaments resume in the fall." "That's quite an evolution, from where you all started to Nathan himself suggesting more contact. If you'd told me a year ago this is where we'd be, I wouldn't have believed it," Robert admitted. "I was so angry, so focused on protecting him from her completely." "As you should have been," Melissa pointed out. "That protection created the safety that's allowing him to heal now." A particularly dramatic burst of gold and red illuminated the sky, drawing appreciative gasps from the gathered guests. In the momentary brightness, Robert caught Nathan's expression, pure joy, uncomplicated by fear or worry. It was the face of a child who felt secure, who believed in his own worth, who trusted the adults in his life to keep him safe. "You know," Robert said quietly, "Nathan asked me a while back if I was lonely. I told him I had him, and that was enough. And it is. More than enough. But I'm starting to think there might be room for more. Eventually, when the time is right." Melissa smiled, her eyes reflecting the fireworks. "I think that's a healthy perspective. No rush, no pressure, just openness to possibilities." "Exactly. Possibilities." As the grand finale erupted across the night sky, Nathan rushed over, wedging himself between the adults at the balcony railing. "This is the best part," he announced, his face upturned to the spectacle above. Robert placed a hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, this remarkable child who had endured so much and emerged with his capacity for joy intact. Whatever the future held, whatever new configurations their family might take, this connection would remain their center, their compass, their true north. In the shower of light and color above Boston Harbor, Robert saw not just the celebration of American independence, but the quiet victory of their own liberation, from fear, from the past's grip, from the limits of what they had thought possible. It wasn't a perfect ending. Real life rarely offered those. But it was a perfect moment. His son beside him, secure and thriving, their path forward illuminated not by certainty, but by possibility. And for now, for tonight, that was more than enough. Valued listeners, we hope Nathan and Robert's journey has moved you. Their story reminds us that healing is never a straight line. It's a path of courage, setbacks, and unexpected turns that can lead to beautiful new beginnings. For more emotionally resonant stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist that explores the resilience of the human spirit. Find it by clicking to your left. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring you compelling narratives that delve into life's complexities and celebrate the strength it takes to overcome our darkest challenges. We can't wait to see you in the comments. Tell us which moment in Nathan and Robert's journey resonated with you most, or share your own story of transformation. Until our next story, remember that even in our most difficult moments, hope remains our most powerful compass.